All gas, no break. Welcome to the show. It's going to be a solo episode, just me on this one, because Justin and Mo are MIA. And I decided we were going to record earlier today, and then that didn't happen. And then kind of just decided, fuck it, I'll do it myself. I'll do it my damn self. I don't need anyone else. So, a wide range of topics to discuss on this show. It's been a couple weeks since we put out our last episode right before the Rams game. Not going to really bother talking at all about what happened in Buffalo last Sunday. Nothing about it was surprising or really worth having a conversation about. So, no need to rehash that. This is kind of just going to be a little bit more of a preview of tomorrow's game and, I guess a preview of the coaching search. Jets have already interviewed a couple of head coaching and GM candidates. So I'll give my thoughts on all that. Give my thoughts on the game tomorrow, Aaron Rodgers, and whatever else. Got a little bit of a cold, so bear with me here. But hope everyone had a happy New Year and a good holidays with friends, family, loved ones, wives, husbands, whatever, whoever you love and whatever you're into. I hope you enjoyed it. So we are just one game away from this nightmare of a 2024 New York Jets season coming to an end. And it went worse than anyone really could have possibly imagined. Like, even in the worst case scenario, like, you probably thought worse. At least, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but worst case scenario, I think even like if everything goes wrong, I think like you would have thought that, worst case, they'd win like 7 games and it would kind of be like maybe like a little bit of a repeat of last year. And I thought last year was like one of the worst seasons ever. And, and I was like, there's no way this season could be worse. And lo and fucking behold, it was a lot worse. There is something funny and ironic and kind of poetic about just how the past 14 years of not going to the playoffs have gone, and the fact that we now have a Hall of Fame, going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. And this is the point where we probably feel like we're at our lowest. I don't want to say rock bottom because this team has taught me there is no such thing as rock bottom. You can always go lower. And, as for the All Gas podcast, we're definitely some questions about our future. So, I mean, we're not going to continue the All Gas No Break name of the podcast. I mean, at this point, we got to see. At this point, got to see if we're continuing the podcast. But I think continuing the podcast is part of the plans. I don't know where everyone is right now, and that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. So, we deal with that, but we are exploring we are definitely exploring the possibilities of name changing. If you've been fucking with us for a while, you might remember us from our 4th and 20 days from 2017 up until 2020 or the end of the 2020 season. So good chance we bring back the 4th and 20 name and branding, might revamp some things. Also been tossing around some other names. One of the names I did think about was the Not Rock Bottom podcast. Got to see if that exists, but was thinking about that just because of the way things go with this team. There's never a rock bottom, always gets worse. It feels like rock bottom now, but it can definitely get worse. And that's if you win or you lose. It's just no matter what, it seems like you lose when you're rooting for this team. But anyways, so now that we got that housekeeping stuff out of the way, be on the lookout for that. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel because we're still going to continue to, when everyone's available, we're going to continue to make episodes in the meantime before the off season really begins. We'll discuss, when they eventually do hire a GM and a coach and all that. A lot of questions that, should be, I'd say within the next month, we should have a much clearer picture of what our, what our future looks like. Step one, I'd say is, step one is the result of tomorrow or today's game. By the time you're watching it, it will be Sunday. So, step one is the result of today's game. We played the Miami Dolphins, 425. As of right now, I believe we are the line on that game has been moving quite a bit. I believe last time I checked, I think the Dolphins were favored by a point, or it might have switched over to us being favored by a point, but looks like Tua is going to be out, and it's going to be Snoop Huntley. Yeah, so on FanDuel right now, we're -1.5 actually. Tua most likely not playing, or it seems like he's all been but officially ruled out. So it's going to be Tyler Snoop Huntley starting for the Dolphins. I do think, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you root, I think that we are going to win this game. I'm not one to tell people how they should root, and all the arguments and discourse about tanking versus not tanking over the over the years has been very exhausting. But basically, right now the Jets, as it sits there in the 7th, right now we have the 7th pick in the draft. If we were to lose and New England, Tennessee, Giants, well, more so the more so, yeah. I mean, if like the Giants, the Titans, if Jacksonville, I think Cleveland and New England are pretty much locked in to the top 2 picks. But Tennessee, the Giants, Jacksonville. So Tennessee and the Giants both have a better strength of schedule than us. So if they were to win, then we could move ahead of them in the draft. Same with Jacksonville. If they win, they have a worse strength of schedule. The Jaguars the Texans play the Titans. Jaguars play the Colts. So those will be 2 games to look out for. Go Jaguars and go Titans in those games. Titans are actually favored to win their game. Texans are, pretty much locked into the 4th seed, so they really don't have anything to play for. Carolina, they don't really have anything to play for other than ruining Atlanta's season, and then Tampa plays the Saints for the NFC South. So, but I think Atlanta will probably end up winning. So realistically, you're probably lucky if you get into the top 5, and that's if you do lose. But unfortunately, I think the Jets are going to win this game. I think that, with it being the possibility that it's going to be Aaron Rodgers' last game, I think that he's going to turn the clock back a little bit and probably, I think he's probably going to have a pretty good game, if I'm being honest. I think he's going to kind of make it a point to go out with a bang. And I don't think he's going to retire. I think he still wants to play. But I think that it's a kind of a mutual parting of ways at this point between him and the Jets. It seems like he's been trying to get cut lately, just like all the comments he's making about like, oh, getting fired by a teenager and all that. And, all the reports seem to be that Woody, that the relationship between him and Woody is fractured and, it isn't a positive relationship anymore. So it's definitely trending in the direction of Aaron Rodgers not being here. And I doubt that a good game tomorrow really brings it back. Rodgers has acknowledged that, that this could be the end for him. And he has, and he has said things like, oh, if I don't get my 500 touchdown, like it's not that big of a deal, which, he can say that, but, I think he definitely wants it. It's a nice, it's a nice even, it's a nice even, like not crooked number. And, Rodgers is like a weirdo who's on drugs and shit. So he probably, so that probably means something to him. And I think it'll mean something to him to make sure that it goes to Devontae Adams. I think they get it done. I do. And you know what? I've seen a lot of Jets fans saying that they don't want to see Aaron Rodgers throw his 500 touchdown with the Jets. This might be a little bit of a hot take, but you know what? I actually want to see Aaron Rodgers. I actually want to see Aaron Rodgers throw his 500 touchdown tomorrow. I do, as long as it doesn't like cause us to win the game or like cost us a draft pick. I really wouldn't mind it. And the reason why is because it's really not very often that the Jets have Hall of Fame Hall of Fame players on their team, let alone a Hall of Fame quarterback. Whether it's, that only seems to happen once every 15 years when we trade with the Packers. So, it's really not often that we have a Hall of Famer on our team at the quarterback position. So it'd be cool. I think it would be cool to see someone do that as a Jet. I know that Rodgers is basically using the Jets as a vessel for like him and Devontae's like personal accomplishments, like padding up their own stats and, making sure that he does everything he can to make sure that his 500 touchdown goes to him. Or if not him, he'll probably get it to Alan Lazard. Something tells me that it will not go to Garrett Wilson. But I think that regardless of what happens, tomorrow will be his last game as a Jet. I don't really see a scenario where he does come back. I don't really see whoever the new GM is and whoever the new head coach is. I just don't see everyone getting aligned to, yeah, we should run this back with Rodgers and, take on everything that comes with Aaron Rodgers, like the whole sideshow Bob act that goes on with him. So I think that the Jets are going to opt for a clean break, and I don't think Rodgers is going to retire. I think it's going to be like a who want me type of situation. And when you look at it, where could he really go? Maybe he goes across town to the Giants and maybe he brings his buddies with him. If they decide to run it back with, that would be extremely stupid for them to do. If they decided to run it back with like Joe Sheen and Brian Dable, do they decide, all right, like, do we want to hinge our jobs on Aaron Rodgers after seeing how poorly it went with the Jets and how everyone there lost their jobs? Maybe they think, maybe they could trick themselves into thinking that with him being another year removed from the injury and stuff like that, that it could go better. And maybe just like removing him from the stench of the Jets organization, that things could go better. And there's a possibility that that's true. I'm not going to sit here and tell you there's not. I definitely think there's a world where Rodgers goes somewhere else next year and plays better. But I think it's going to be like a who want me type of situation. And like really the only teams that I would really see like being in the mix for him would be, maybe Tennessee, but I don't think he'll go to Tennessee. I'd say it's either Tennessee, the Giants, maybe the Raiders, depending where they end up drafting, because they're probably not going to be, they've won a couple of games here down the stretch, so they've kind of played their way out of, out of like Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders territory. And, there's so much can change between now and the draft, so who knows? But seems like, I feel like I could see Vegas being like, I could see Devontae being like, hey, listen, I have like a house with a Taco Bell in it in Vegas. Like, we can just go live there. And, you can throw touchdowns to me there. Antonio Pierce may or may not keep his job. If he does, I could definitely see Rodgers being a fit there because he's a defensive guy. So he'll stay out of the way and kind of let them do their thing, I would think. I know that things may have ended kind of sourly between Devontae and the Raiders, but I also have a feeling that they would welcome him back with Rodgers. So those are really like the only teams when you look at it. I mean, maybe like a dark horse could be like the Colts. Like if they decide, I think they're gonna, I mean, there's a lot of negative. There's a lot of negative press on Anthony Richardson right now, with the season that he's had, and like tapping out of the game, and it seems like they need. I know Pat McAfee like dug into the whole organization and said how they need like a whole like culture change and like overhaul. I don't really see Rodgers being a part of that. I think they would be more likely to. I think they'd be more likely to fire their coach and try and find like a new coach to like unlock Anthony Richardson and get it all together for him. Because I mean, he has the athletic ability. He makes specifically throws to Alec Pierce that are just like that'll make your jaw drop, and he can run, like he can do all the things. He just can't put it together upstairs for whatever reason. And I don't know what the whole tapping out of the game thing was about, or what made that like okay to him. But hopefully it's something that he learned from, and something that he'll be able to bounce back from. I think it will be. I mean, he already came back and played, so I think that there was some level of forgiveness, but yeah, it does seem like that whole like locker room and that whole team is kind of in disarray. Like I think Jonathan Taylor spoke out saying that like that the standard needs to be raised, that the bar needs to be raised, that they're just like too content with the losing. So we'll certainly see what happens there. The only other, I mean, I know that cuck Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk said there's a possibility of the Steelers. I don't really see it. I think they'll just stick with Russ. I think there's a better chance that Steelers quarterback Justin Fields is the Jets quarterback next year than Aaron Rodgers is the Steelers quarterback. I don't think they would. I know him and Tomlin, have kind of had some moments where it looked like maybe they were doing a little football flirting with each other, like from the field to the sidelines. Like there was that one game where they were like nodding at each other and like smiling when it looked like Rodgers could be like on his way out of Green Bay. But it didn't really amount to anything. And I think that with the way Rodgers likes to do things and the way the Steelers like to do things, I just don't think it would really line up. I don't see them doing that. I think they would stick with Russ. I don't see how the Vikings don't stick with Sam Darnold at this point. So yeah, I mean, really the only realistic teams I would say for Aaron Rodgers, if any, is like Vegas, Tennessee, and maybe the Giants, but it all depends, I think, like where those, where the dominoes fall as far as the draft goes tomorrow, I think with the Browns losing today, I think the highest the Jets could pick would be 3, but with a win, they could probably end up picking like as low as like 10. So there's definitely a pretty significant swing that could happen depending on the result. And I've just seen this movie too many times to not think that the Jets will win. If you've been watching this team and if you've been watching this team in meaningless games at the end of the year, as long as I have, I think, you may share that sentiment. So, we'll see what ends up happening. I do think that Davante Adams ends up catching the 500th touchdown. I think Breece Hall probably get one too. I think the Dolphins will put up some points. The Jets defense is pretty. Sauce Gardner alluded to it last week that the Jets defense is pretty. That there's players that are checked out, which really is not a secret. So, there's definitely a degree of that going on here. That you got players that are checked out. So I'm sure that they're still going to move the ball and they're still going to put up points. I don't think the Dolphins defense is all that good. And I think Rodgers is kind of going to be on a mission, like just in case this does end up being his last game. Because I remember he thought that game against the Lions with the Packers, there was definitely part of him that thought it was going to maybe be his last game or his last game, at least with the Packers. Like, I think someone on the Lions wanted to do a jersey swap with him, and he was like, "No, I'm going to hang on to this one." And then, him and his buddy Cobb walking off the field together. Definitely was a sense of finality. So I'm sure there'll be a similar image of him and Davante Adams doing something similar, in tomorrow's game. But yeah, I think that, but I do think the Jets will win. Probably be a sloppy, game. They'll probably end up winning like 23-20, something like that. I'm sure it'll be a weird score because all these games have kind of weird scores because they haven't had a reliable kicker all year, and that's kind of where the problems for this team started. But make no mistake, this team's issues run a lot deeper than not having a kicker. There's no leadership. There's no unity. There's no cohesion. It's just basically, I'm sure you've heard that before, but it's basically just a bunch of independent contractors, or like a travel, they're a travel football team, and they're just kind of looking out for themselves. They're not really looking out for each other. Sauce Gardner is going to miss the game with an injury. People kind of, I think myself included, we kind of went a little hard on Sauce Gardner this year. It was definitely a drop off from his first 2 years where he was an All-Pro, but he only gave up 25 completions the whole year, and he only gave up one touchdown to Calvin Ridley in week 2. So even though you could definitely point at his tackling problems, and you could definitely say that's something that needs to be cleaned up, but I think a lot of the hate and a lot of the anger that was directed at Sauce, by myself included, I still think he tweets and says some dumb shit on the internet that he shouldn't say. But as far as his play on the field, he's still pretty good. He's still like a top 10 corner. He's just maybe not like a top 3 or a top 5 corner this year. It was a bit of a fall. It was a bit of a regression from the first 2 years, but still a very good year by any corner standards. So a lot of that was, a lot of that was overblown. And I think for me, a lot of that was just kind of like just overall frustration with the team and just the way things were going. And, he's supposed to be one of like and he's supposed to be one of the leaders and like one of the faces of the franchise. He gets all the Buffalo Wild Wings commercials and, he's sauce and, all the kids, all the kids love him and all that stuff. Like, if you don't believe me, go to training camp. Everyone wants to see Sauce. Everyone wants Sauce to, come say hello and sign their shit after practice. So, he's definitely one of the, cornerstones, faces of the franchise. And, he's definitely, I would say, we've talked a lot about it in podcasts past. So like who should be the first, who should be the first member of our 2022 draft class to get paid, or who's it going to be? And we've kind of flip-flopped on it a little bit, but I think that it's probably going to be Sauce, because I don't know if I see Garrett Wilson committing long-term right away. I think they'd be extremely stupid to not pick up Garrett Wilson's fifth-year option, whoever the new GM is. It would be extremely foolish not to do that, but I think that, I think Garrett Wilson will at least be on this team next year, or at least he should be, because I think you're going to get Rodgers out. I think it's clear that the young players on this team, like Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, those are really the only two that are really worth a damn as far as younger players. Because, Devontae Adams, he'll probably be gone with Rodgers. Allen Lazard, I think, is going to be gone no matter what. And then, after Garrett, it gets really, really thin at wide receiver. So that's going to be a problem that they're going to need to address pretty aggressively, whether in the draft or in free agency. I'm actually looking up free agent wide receivers for this year right now, just to see what it looks like. Okay, that's running backs. No, I want wide receivers. Yeah, so, Stephon Diggs is a free agent. Probably going to cost too much. T. Higgins is a free agent. If you could sign T. Higgins, that would make sense. Keenan Allen is going to be a free agent. He's old. But I think even if you sign someone who's like old, or like him, or like an Amari Cooper, even Brandon Cooks, like I think, or Chris Godwin, he's coming off an injury, but I'd be down to like kind of give one of these guys like a contract that's if they even want to come to the Jets, which is that's a whole nother obstacle. Like, we don't even know if there's going to be a GM and a head coach, but even like someone like a Tyler Boyd, like we just need like another like professional wide receiver to play on the other side of Garrett Wilson. Because if we don't have a wide receiver next year and it's just Garrett Wilson, and then it's just like, like Xavier Gibson and like Malachi Corley and like, God, like Jason Brownlee, if he even still exists, like it's going to get grim real quick. So I think you're going to have to sign a wide receiver, even if it's just like a 1-year deal. And, even if you're not in like win now mode, you're going to have to like find someone that's just like a professional that can like play the opposite side of him. It doesn't even have to really be like a T. Higgins or Amari Cooper or Keenan Allen or Chris Godwin or anyone like that. Brandon Cooks I would love, but I'm sure he's probably going to want to go somewhere that's more where he'd be more ready to win. But he's a professional and he gets 1,000 yards receiving like wherever he goes. But even like a cheaper option, like Mike Williams is a free agent. I don't think he'll come back here, regardless of Aaron Rodgers being gone or not. Maybe, maybe he wants another egg sandwich. I don't know. But even someone like a Tyler Boyd or a DJ Chark, Zay Jones. I know these aren't like, Mac Hollins. I know these aren't like, I know these aren't like very exciting names, but you kind of just need someone there, because like if it's just Garrett Wilson and like a bunch of broads, and Garrett's getting double teamed, and defenses are they're putting all their they're putting all their focus on stopping Garrett Wilson, like he'll probably just get even more frustrated, and then he'll really be gone. So that's something they need to do. I think regardless of what they do in the draft, I think they do need to sign a competent professional NFL wide receiver to play the other side, maybe a slot receiver. Who knows what'll happen, like with the whole Malachi Corley situation. Thanks a lot, Joe Douglas. Yeah, you had him ranked ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. Just next time someone wants to argue with you and tell you that Joe Douglas was actually a good GM, or was like one of the better GMs that the Jets actually had, just remind them that he had Malachi Corley like ahead of Adonai Mitchell and Brian Thomas Jr. on his draft board. Just remember that he's real good at evaluating talent. Remember when him and Robert Saleh were texting each other on like like going into the third round of the draft, like no matter what, we're getting him. Yeah, real cool, real cool. I'm real glad you did that. But hopefully a new coaching staff can maybe unlock him or actually use him. What a foreign concept. You use the players that you draft, not just your first round picks, and not just on a part-time basis or after someone gets hurt. These would all be nice things to see the new regime implement, because this next rebuild shouldn't take another 5 years. We've been perpetually rebuilding for 15 years now, but it shouldn't take, realistically, if you do it right, it should only take like 2 to 3 years to get back into the playoffs. So, it would be nice if they could either, find a way to use Malachi Corley, maybe give him like some sort of a Debo package, get creative. God forbid we get creative with, God forbid we get creative with our offense. And on that note, I'm going to transition into some of the head coaches that we have, some of the head coaches that we've interviewed. So the Jets have interviewed Mike Vrabel and Ron Rivera. And we have interviews lined up. We have an interview lined up with Rex Ryan. And then, what do you call it? And then there's also rumors that they want to interview Cliff Kingsbury, Washington Commanders offensive coordinator. Supposedly they're interested in interviewing Arthur Smith, and they also have an interest in interviewing Matt Campbell, the head coach of Iowa State. Matt Campbell would be an interesting one. I always liked his energy as the Iowa State coach, because I remember watching some of his games like in 2020 when I thought that he could be a candidate, because the Jets wanted to interview him in like the 2019 cycle when they ended up hiring Gase, but he didn't want to leave. Apparently he might be more willing to listen this time around. He's always interested me, like always liked his energy, and I always felt like, at least situationally, it seems like he has at least he has the basics down. Like it seems like he has a basic understanding of how to manage the clock and how to use timeouts, which is something that escapes so many coaches, but really no one in the league does it worse than Jeff Ulbrich. Like I thought Saleh was bad at game management and clock management, but Jeff Ulbrich is like just that much worse. And then, he's coached Will McDonald and Breece Hall, so that would be an interesting dynamic too, and to see how he uses them. So, I guess we'll see if he does in fact take an interview with the Jets. Arthur Smith is a hard no for me. I think the Steelers offense is like not that good. And it's really not creative at all. It's like very, it's like very vanilla and predictable. I think they have like the 24th ranked offense in the league right now, or something like that. And they've been especially pedestrian, over the last few weeks as they're limping into the playoffs, and they lost tonight. So if San Diego beats the Raiders, then they would have to go to Baltimore. Because I think the Steelers could beat the Texans in Houston if that ends up being the matchup for them. Because I think that Houston is kind of like on that same level of like a bad team that's going to get into the playoffs, mainly because they play in a shit division. The Steelers, I think, are a better team than the Texans, but I think they'll get dog walked if they have to go up to Baltimore or down to Baltimore again. So they're probably praying for a Raiders win tomorrow, I would imagine. But yeah, I wouldn't want Arthur Smith. I think that things did not go well with him as the head coach. Things did not go well with him as the head coach in Atlanta. He was kind of like Gase 2.0, kind of pissed everyone off and didn't use Kyle Pitts correctly. I mean, it doesn't seem like anyone knows how to use Kyle Pitts correctly. Maybe he might just stink. I'm not sure. Or he might just be, he might just not be what he was hyped up to be. And maybe using that high of a pick on a tight end was in fact not a good idea. But either way, I'm out on Arthur Smith. Cliff Kingsbury, I'd be all about it. Even though he kind of had questionable, he kind of had a questionable tenure as the Cardinals head coach, but there were some playoff appearances there, and he had Kyler Murray playing good football and pretty much right away. So that would definitely intrigue me if we were going into the season drafting a Cam Ward, or if we were able to, draft a quarterback at some point. That would intrigue me. So that's why I think that losing tomorrow is like really in our best interest, because I think that there's so much talk about how attractive is this Jets job, or who's going to want to take this job. Like, everyone's kind of already ruled Ben Johnson out for the Jets head coaching job, because it's like, it seems like he doesn't want any part of them, and it seems like maybe they respect him too much to even bother to reach out. It seems like he's going to be very selective about who he interviews with, and it seems like he's only going to interview with teams he's only going to interview with a team where he's like likely to take the job. So everyone kind of seems to think it's a foregone conclusion that he'll end up in Chicago and trying to unlock Caleb Williams and his potential. But we did complete complete interviews with Mike Vrabel and Ron Rivera. Pros and cons to both, of those candidates. I mean, Mike Vrabel right now seems to be the hot commodity. If you look around Jets Twitter and the Jets, the Jets content creator community, everyone seems to love Mike Vrabel, because a lot of it because he's he's an asshole, and that's something that the Jets have definitely been missing, is like someone who's an asshole who's going to instill discipline and command respect. And I think those are all good traits, and I wouldn't hate it if he is the guy who gets hired. Now, I do think that if New England ends up firing Gerard Mayo, I think that Vrabel will go there. But I also think that if that does happen, I wouldn't panic too much. I think it could be a blessing in disguise, because I think that Mike Vrabel, he did get to an AFC Championship game with Ryan Tannehill and the Titans. But in my opinion, to be honest, I think he's a bit of a Derrick Henry merchant, and I don't know if he would really hire the right staff to run a modern offense, like a modern NFL offense that's like, resembles something of the mid 2020s that we are living in. Something the Jets have not had. Like, that's really my first priority. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I want a head coach with experience. We keep hiring these coordinators, specifically defensive coordinators, and it doesn't work out. And I get that. But to me, the main priority is making sure that the head coach that we hire is either capable of running a modern offense that is going to be effective, or is capable of hiring the right people to do that. We haven't really cracked the code. I mean, Robert Saleh had Mike LaFleur, but he was a rookie. He was like a novice play caller when he got here, and then and then Woody wanted blood after the way the fucking 2022 season ended, which is pathetic. That really the peak of this whole thing, like the whole Douglas Saleh regime, it was like we peaked in October of 2022 when at that time it felt like, wow, like the future is so bright, like if only we could just figure out quarterback, and maybe even Zach Wilson can, maybe even maybe even then you weren't ready yet to give up on Zach Wilson. To me, I didn't really fully give up on Zach Wilson until that game in New England where he like couldn't create, he couldn't complete a screen pass to like Braxton Berrios, and the Jets averaged like 2 feet of offense per play. And then he got benched for Mike White, and everyone was wearing the Mike fucking White t-shirts after that, and that to me was the moment where I gave up on Zach, and I think that's the moment where the organization gave up on him too. Well, really, the moment the organization gave up on him was when they traded for Rodgers. But obviously, we don't need to rehash that. They made the mistake of making him the next man in command if Rodgers were to go down. But that was last year. So I mean, yeah, definitely some pros and cons to the Vrabel thing. He's not my first choice, but if they end up hiring him, I wouldn't necessarily hate it. I'm not too crazy about Ron Rivera either. I mean, he took the Panthers to a Super Bowl like a decade ago, and he had some success with the at the time Washington Redskins / football team, but it seems everywhere he goes, it always seems to flame out. And I think especially like with the Rex situation too, I think people just forget like how that whole thing ended. So, the one good thing I would say about Ron Rivera, I mean, he would be an adult and he'd certainly be an upgrade. I'd actually really like Ron Rivera if we were to hire like a Liam Cohen or like an offensive coordinator. And really right now, I think Liam Cohen is actually probably the coach that I would want most to be the head coach, if you ask me. I know he doesn't have the experience necessarily, but he's doing a really good job in Tampa. They run the ball well. They have a very effective offense. And Baker Mayfield's had like he's been having like the best years of his career with the Tampa Bay Bucks. So to me, Liam Cohen would be the guy. And I think, if you could also poach Mike Greenberg from Tampa's front office and kind of just poach from that organization, I think that would be a good direction to go in. The one good thing about Ron Rivera, though, is that during his time, both with with Washington and Carolina, coincidentally or not, both of their owners were like they were either forced to sell their teams or they did sell their teams. And obviously, we are in a situation where we would definitely like to, for our owner to sell the team, and there's really no, no sign of that happening. So I don't know if it's something Ron Rivera did, or if he was bringing allegations to light or what. But if Ron Rivera can get Woody Johnson to sell the team, sign me up yesterday. That's about the only good thing I would like about Ron Rivera as a head coach. I'd prefer him as a defensive coordinator, but it seems like I don't think he would come here to be a defensive coordinator. I think he's coming here to, I think if he's coming here, it's to be a head coach. Now, to address the elephant in the room, the New York Jets on Tuesday are interviewing Rex Ryan. This is both hilarious and also terrifying if you're a Jets fan. So there is part of me that feels like if you're going to be the laughingstock team that you are and have been for the past 14 years, you might as well just lean into it. Hire Rex Ryan. Really just lean into the bit of like how much of a joke you are. But if you're trying to be a serious football team, and if you're trying to, actually win and end this playoff drought and be good and, get with the times, so to speak, in the NFL, the way forward is not back. Nobody else is considering Rex Ryan. Nobody else is interviewing him. I don't think he's even, he hasn't even gotten like defensive coordinator interviews in like years since like, I don't know, a few years back when like the Broncos and Cowboys interviewed him for their vacancies. And I see a lot of people saying, oh yeah, I would like Rex as a DC on this staff. Sure, that'd be awesome, but that's not going to happen. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Rex Ryan, he says he has unfinished business with the New York Jets, that obviously he wants to come back and finish what he started, lead this team to a Super Bowl. And I admire Rex for the fact that he's like the one person in the world who, like, you could say definitely, he's like if there's one person in the world that you could say definitely wants to be a New York Jet and wants the head coaching job, it's Rex. How far that goes, I don't know, or I don't know how far it should go. But I do have a feeling that if he gets Woody Johnson, in a room, he's going to know what to say. He's going to know what to say, and he's going to want to, he's going to know what to say, and I think he's going to make it very, very hard for him to say no. So that definitely scares me. At this point, I would say it's, like pretty much, I'd say at this point, it's like probably like a 50% chance that he gets the job. I'm not basing that off anything. That's just my feeling. I'm sure they're going to drag the process out and all that, but it would not surprise me at all if at the end of this, they end up hiring Rex Ryan, whether it be because it drags out and no one else wants to take the job. Maybe the Lions make too deep of a playoff run and they want to interview Aaron Glenn, but maybe Woody gets impatient and he just says, fuck it. Like, let's just hire Rex. Like, he's here and he wants the job anyway. But I mean, really with Rex Ryan, the only way they should hire him is they literally strike out on everyone else. And like, they interview Aaron Glenn, after I guess they could interview him like either during like the first round bye if they get it, if they do beat Minnesota tomorrow, which I think they will. Then they could probably interview him like during that bye week, which I guess would be over this next week. I think like Wednesday is when coaches that are like currently employed can like start to interview for head coaching jobs. So I mean, if Aaron Glenn decides like if the Lions go on a deep playoff run and they're not able to get a hold of him till late, or they interview him and they struck out on everyone else, and he decides it's not for him or he wants to stay in Detroit or whatever, and then I feel like Rex Ryan should be a last resort if anything. But I think if you're hiring Rex Ryan, I think in 2025, I think you're sending the message that you're not serious, which I'd almost prefer, because the Jets have been very unserious for a very long time now. But they always seem to find ways to trick you into thinking otherwise. So it almost would be refreshing to like know going into a new regime that's not going to be serious. I mean, we all knew that Adam Gase wasn't going to be. We all knew that like Adam Gase was like a terrible hiring and like a very unserious head coach. But there was like there was that part of you that held out hope that that Sam Darnold would be good enough that it wouldn't matter. Or that he could that he could unlock something with like him and Le'Veon Bell. Like for some reason, like there was just this like degree of hope that the moves that they made over the offseason and that the acquisitions that they had made and the players that they had that would somehow like trump how bad the coaching was, which obviously was not realistic. But I think like if you're hiring Rex Ryan and you're not getting a quarterback in the first round, then even with Tyrod, who I think Tyrod should be and I think he will be QB1 next year, and that's regardless of whether or not they draft the quarterback in the first round. I think Tyrod needs to be the opening day starter. But I think at that point it's like you just know, okay, like we're not going to playoffs, or we're not gonna like this year isn't gonna end in anything of consequence. So you can kind of just like tune it out and accept that reality early, rather than these past few years where you've had to like wait and like watch it crash and burn to truly believe how bad it was. So yeah, I don't think Rex Ryan's a good idea. No one else is considering him. He hasn't coached since his last time he coached was like 2016 in Buffalo, and like that ended pretty terribly. He got fired after only 2 years. Obviously, he was the last head coach to get the Jets to the playoffs and to get them to back-to-back AFC championship games like 2009 and 2010. Those are like two of the most fun years ever watching the Jets, outside of my first year watching the Jets, which was 1998. But like, being like not like a full blown adult, but being like, a young adult for those runs was a lot of fun. So obviously you get nostalgic about that, right? But like you have to remember how poorly it ended with Rex Ryan. And the whole, this whole thing about the Jets being a circus and the whole LOL Jets, and the Jets are the butt of every joke, in like NFL circles, on the meme pages, on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you go, media members making jokes about the Jets. Like that really started with Rex. Because I mean, in the 2000s, the Jets were a pretty like decently respectable organization. Like they didn't get to the playoffs every year, but they got to the playoffs almost every other year. And when they didn't get to the playoffs, they kind of just, they kind of sucked quietly. But they were always able to like, even when they sucked, like they were able to draft well, and they were able to, bounce back pretty quickly and get back into the playoffs. So it was kind of, they didn't win a championship or anything, but like they weren't this laughing stock that they weren't now. They didn't really become a laughing stock until after the back-to-back AFC championship years. After that, though, like Rex Ryan just kept running his mouth too much, and the team that he had was no longer talented enough to back up the shit talk. Because really, the teams that he brought to those AFC championship games were Eric Mangini's rosters that he brought to being close to the promised land. And then when he got his own paws on the team, he kind of fucked everything up. I mean, he drafted Kyle Wilson and like Quentin Coples. Like there were a lot of bad, there were a lot of bad picks that during that Rex Ryan Tannenbaum regime, or even the Rex Idzik regime. And like I can't help but feel like Rex had an influence or was kind of to blame for some of those draft blunders. Because I mean, when it was Tannenbaum and Mangini, it seemed like they were much better at identifying talent, and a lot of that talent got gutted. I mean, I think really it all started when you got rid of Braylon Edwards and you brought in Plaxico Burress, and then you got rid of Jericho Cotchery and you brought in Derek Mason to replace him, and then and then you draft Kyle Wilson because you felt like you needed more secondary help to compete with the Colts, because the Colts were the team that like really exposed your secondary in the AFC Championship. And like, you could do like a revisionist history or whatever, or like a redraft. I don't know exactly how that draft board went, but I'm sure there would have been someone better that they could have taken. So yeah, Rex is we got to move forward, not backwards. And if you look online at the people who want Rex Ryan back, whether it's on Twitter or wherever, a lot of it is like kind of the worst people that want him back. And that should kind of tell you everything you need to know. So yeah, I wouldn't. I would not seriously consider hiring Rex Ryan. Who else? I mean, Aaron Glenn, I'm torn on because there's a lot of unknowns there. Obviously, obviously, I think that to just dismiss him because he's another defensive coordinator, while I understand why one might be dismissive of that, I think that that's a little lazy, but it's still an unknown, right? Because like people talk about how Aaron Glenn is like a great leader, and people talk about how like they'd be confident in his ability to to build a good staff, and maybe he can, maybe he's more D'Amico Ryans than Robert Saleh. We don't know, but it would be intriguing. And obviously he has the whole connection having played corner for the Jets. I mean, those were some of he was one of the better players on some of those some of those old school like late 90s early 2000s teams. So there'd definitely be a nostalgia factor, and it would definitely be cool, but you would just have to see what he does as far as hire, as far as who he would bring in for his staff. Hopefully he realizes from being in Detroit like that, because a lot of the defensive minded coaches their offenses, those teams' offenses tend to be very conservative. I mean, we've seen that. I mean, we've seen that movie how many times with the Jets over the last decade and a half, where, it seems like we almost always have a conservative offense, and not only a conservative offense, but just a flat out bad offense. Really offense is the way of the world in today's NFL. So hopefully being in Detroit and seeing how aggressive they are and like how good they are at it, hopefully that makes him understand the importance of offense, and hopefully also having game planning against other offenses like the Minnesota Vikings twice a year, like Jordan Love and the Packers twice a year, and the Buccaneers, and like all these, he's going to have the game plan against the Eagles. And obviously he's been working with he's not working with a full deck of cards lately. The Lions defense has been decimated by injuries. So it's hard to really judge him based on like how badly the Lions defense might be looking as of late. But what do you call it? Yeah, it would just be, there's just a lot of just a lot of unknowns, with him. But I would be, I'd definitely be open to it. And it seems like he is kind of it does seem like he is kind of like it seems like it is his turn and his time for to become a head coach. Him and Ben Johnson, I think both will both end up getting hired during this coaching cycle. So I think that sums up pretty much all the coaching candidates as of now. I mean, obviously, we'll let you know if, obviously, we'll let you know and we'll talk about it if there are any other ones that come up here over the next, however long this process takes for the Jets to hire a coach. And I really do hope that they hire a GM before a coach. I feel like it would be very unserious to do it the other way around. And, I think the Jets need to stop, they need to stop acting like they know more than everyone else with their unconventional ways at times. And I think they just operate like a normal NFL franchise that, that is able to, see some semblance of success, in this, in this day and age. And those teams, they hire their GM first, and then they hire their coach when they have a GM and they can get everyone on the same page with the vision. It doesn't work the other way. So I really do hope that, I really do hope they hire a GM first. As far as GMs go, I know they interviewed Matt Nagy from the, or not Matt Nagy, what's the guy's name? Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl. That is, that is an interesting one. Kind of like, kind of a wild card. I think had they interviewed, Dimitrov, the Falcons guy? I mean, I would like him, if they were able to, I would like him if they could get him, because he, it's not often that these guys get second chances. But yeah, they did interview him a few weeks back. I think that would be, I think if they could get him, that would be a home run. They've interviewed John Robinson, and they've interviewed Luis Riddick. So John Robinson is he is a scout, or has been a scout for, he was a scout for the New England Patriots, and then he's been the director of player personnel for the Bucks for the past for the past 11 years. I think like I would like Tom Dimitroff just because he kind of checks both boxes. Like Joe Douglas was a scout, and like McCagnon, I guess, was kind of a scout, and then like Idzik and like Tannenbaum were more like cap guys. So you need someone who kind of understands like both sides of the game, I think, which is why like right now I would say Thomas Dimitroff is like would be like the lead candidate. Now the Jets also interviewed Luis Reddick, who is an analyst for ESPN. He used to play in the NFL, and you know, yeah, he used to play in the NFL. And now he's now he works for ESPN. He does like college football and NFL like analyst work for ESPN. Um, a lot's been made of him, and the Jets interviewing him for the GM vacancy. Now, I don't know. I don't know how good of an idea it would be or not. I mean, he doesn't really. He does have some. He's never been a GM, but he does have. He does have a good like 12 years of. He does have a good 12 years of experience as an executive. Now, granted, that was all like in the 2000s and the early 2010s. But a lot's been made of him interviewing for the job because, as many members of the media do, and this is what happens when you constantly lose, and when you constantly lose in a market like New York, the media is going to criticize you and they're going to make fun of you, and fans don't really like that. I think some of it's fair, some of it's not fair. Like, now there's this whole thing with like, oh, Zach Wilson should get another chance because like look how Sam Darnold and Geno Smith are doing, and I think it's a lot more. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. But as far as Luis Riddick goes, I don't like that he hasn't been. I don't like. I can't sit here and tell you that Rex Ryan hasn't been a coach for like 10 years plus, so that he wouldn't be a good candidate, and then tell you that that doesn't matter for Luis Riddick. But like a lot's being made of the fact that that he's being critical of the Jets and like clowning the organization like on TV and stuff. And to that, I would say this. I mean, would you like it better if he lied to you and told you everything was great? Would you like it better if he was just like another puppet for Woody Johnson? Or do you want someone who recognizes what the problems are and wants to take steps to solve them? So that's one thing that would intrigue me if if you're talking about going for someone like Luis Riddick. He's definitely not my first choice. But I don't think you can just write him off just because he says some things about the team that may have ruffled some feathers. So, that's my thoughts pretty much on what they've done so far. Obviously, still a lot to come in this search for our next head coach and our next GM. But I think that as far as whether or not they'll get it right, there isn't really much. I don't know. Like this whole 30-13 thing is weird to me. Like on one hand, it's like, all right, like they've tried everything else and nothing else has worked. But also it's like weird that you have the 30-13 that's like leading this GM and head coaching search. And at the same time, they're like posting graphics about like, the Jets trading Garrett Wilson and, like who's going to be Garrett Wilson's next team, and like look at the odds and stuff. Like I think that comes off as a little weird and a little tone deaf, and I just don't know. I just don't know how seriously you can really take that whole operation. So we'll see what happens. We'll see, who they hire in the coming weeks. Hopefully we can get the band together this week and we can record a podcast after this game and, really, really make a run through all the candidates and, any new developments that might be coming up. Woody, if you're listening, I know it's tempting. I get it. He's gonna seduce you. He's gonna seduce you, but do not hire Rex Ryan. It's not a good idea, especially if you haven't hired a GM yet. You remember how that went when you fired Mike Tannenbaum and forced the GM to keep Rex Ryan. You want to go through that again? You want to get another John Idzik to be the next GM? Then yeah, hire Rex Ryan on Tuesday. Fucking idiot. What do I care? Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. Appreciate you all tuning in. We will hopefully we'll talk to you again this coming week. And yeah, go Jets, I guess. I mean, hopefully they lose, but they're probably going to win. So, we'll have a much clearer picture of everything in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We'll be here to talk about it. It'll, once our draft pick is solidified, it'll be mock draft season once again, and we'll do what we do best, and we'll get on our off-season shit. So, exciting times ahead, or we're so untold. Or it's always darkest before the dawn, or some bullshit like that. Anyway, that's it for this episode. This has been episode 121 of the All Gas No Break podcast. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace. Unlock the swag. The swag unlock.